the whites because they can have their own countries. Okay? But we cannot. And you say, yeah, but that's because it's all about oil, right? It's always been about oil. Wrong. They didn't know about oil until later on. They did all of this without knowing there was oil in Saudi Arabia. Okay? There are, of course, political reasons. You can get into the whole jewel and the crown, empire, yada, 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 if you want to. Okay? But it boils down to, in this time period, you got your social Darwinism. Okay? Obviously, you're going to be pretty upset about that. This is the beginning. It's not nearly the end. There'll be other things that are going to happen, both positive and negative, and in some ways I am oversimplifying it. But this is the basic way it's going to be taught in Syria. Okay? And so you look at the Ottoman Empire, and you notice one thing that's kind of interesting. How about that? They're not any particular color. And you look at another map. Oh, actually, before I get to the map, quickly, just a quick sidebar here. Notice Africa doesn't look any different than it did before World War I. You know, this could pretty much be almost the exact same map. There's some subtle changes, but they're so subtle I'm not even sure where they are. You still have got every single country, for the most part, a possession, a possession, a possession, a possession, a possession, a possession, independent. And who are these independent nations? Again, Liberia and Ethiopia. And just to show you how weird they are, well, Egypt is independent, but it's British controlled. How can you be independent and controlled by the British? I don't know, but that's what they're going to claim. Okay, so Africa, no real major difference for World War I. But again, going back and looking at the Ottoman Empire, you can see again, here, green controlled by England, brown controlled by France, pink controlled by Italy. Yeah, this is Libya. But the heart of the Ottoman Empire, you know, where the capital was, Istanbul, where the Sultan lived, that's not colored. The Europeans didn't control that one. The country of Turkey gets to be free. How come? What'd they do? What did he do? Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. One of the most important men ever in the Middle East. And you look at him and you say, hey, that guy doesn't look like an Arab. Lawrence of Arabia looked more like an Arab than this guy did. Okay? Well, why? Because what Ataturk is doing is he is turning Turkey into a more Western country. He is able to get away with it for two reasons. One, the Ottoman Empire, as we know, had a lot of problems. It's crumbling, it's done this wrong, it's done that wrong. He's going to fix all those problems. Two, he's a war hero. Okay? And so he takes control of Turkey. And this is a great picture of him because it shows how he's merging Western ideas. This guy looks British. And Muslim ideas, wearing a fez. Alright? And what we see is, look at all these kinds of things he does. He sets up a democracy. But he also becomes very nationalistic. Turkey, to this very day, is still a very nationalistic country. He has the state controlling the economy, and this is the most important thing that he does, secularism. Get familiar with this term secular. It means non-religious. He takes the power that the Muslim clerics have in Turkey, and he destroys it in a lot of different ways. Okay? And of course in 1924, completely gets rid of the caliphate. Turkey is a very, very important country today. Did you know, for example, that Turkey is the only country in the Middle East that has a direct alliance with the United States? That Turkey is a member of NATO. Ladies and gentlemen, if Turkey gets attacked by some other country, we have to go to war. Because they're that close to us. And what's so fascinating about Turkey is still very much today like it was under Ataturk. And that if you go there, you got to see people who look just like you, dressed just like you. The women will not be covered up in any way. They have secular education, meaning the education is not religious. They have courts and laws that are very similar to ours. But 5 times a day, at the appropriate time, the entire country stops, turns towards Mecca, and prays. Because they are still Muslim, and they still follow their religion. But they don't do it because the government tells them to. They do it because they want to. Alright? So you can see some of the other things that Ataturk does. Again, secular education, meaning non-religious. He even allows women to be dressed as Western women are dressed. And to me, personally, the most powerful thing that he does is, it seems minor when you're writing it down, but he changes the very alphabet that the people use. Instead of being an Arabic alphabet, it's now a Roman alphabet, clearly European. So he's making a big, big change in Turkey. Again, a change that we still see to this very day. That's why Turkey's so unique. But let's keep going, and let's really try to understand the most important treaty ever written in world history, and also, let's be blunt, the worst treaty ever written. And that's the Treaty of Versailles. That's how I pronounce it, by the way, Versailles, not Versailles, but Versailles. There was a whole bunch of treaties that ended World War I. There was a treaty which destroyed the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There was a treaty that they wrote with the Soviet Union all the way to the 20s. It was 1924 when they actually wrote it. There was a treaty which destroyed the Ottoman Empire. But the treaty that will end the war with Germany is the most infamous treaty ever written. Let me explain. The British and the French needed an answer to their crying widows, to their mourning children who lost their fathers, and to all the parents who lost their sons. They needed something to explain the disappearance of an entire generation of men. They needed to blame somebody. Couldn't blame the Austrians for two reasons. One, the Austrians were destroyed. Two, the Austrians did get their Archduke shot, so, alright, cut them a little slack there. So the best people to blame were the people who had destroyed Belgium, the militaristic Germans. So this is what they did to Germany. Get this down. They took land away. Alsace-Lorraine in France, the Polish corridor in Poland. They limited the size of the German army. They couldn't have more than 1,000 men in their army. Guys, that's a police force, not an army. They limited the size of the Navy to practically nothing. They told them they could not put any troops at all on the border with France in what's called the Rhineland. They made them pay terrible reparations. Lots and lots of money. And last, and definitely not least, they cut off an entire piece of Germany. Look how they did this. They did it in a tricky way. They looked at Poland, which is right here, and they said, Poland doesn't have a port. It's landlocked. That's not nice. Let's give Poland a port. So they took this land from Germany. Germans live here, not Polish people. And they gave it to Poland. They called it the Polish corridor. And again, they justified it by saying the Polish people need a port. The reality of what it does is, you see this part of Germany, it cuts it off from the rest of the country. You know who was born here? Bismarck. This is the most militaristic part of Germany, known as East Prussia. So by making a Polish corridor here, you're cutting off the most militaristic part of Germany from the rest of the country. But how do you justify all that? How do you get the Germans to agree to all of these punishments? I mean, this is just nuts, all this stuff they're making the Germans do. There's only one way to do it, and that is for the Germans to accept blame for it. And they write the most infamous clause ever written in any treaty, Article 231. What's an article? It's like Article 1, you do this, Article 2, you'll do that, Article 3, blah, 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 blah. Number 231. It's called the War Guilt Clause, Article 231. And it says something very, very straightforward. You know what it says? Germany is to blame for World War I. Germany is to blame for World War I. And if Germany is to blame for World War I, then of course you can do all this to Germany. All those deaths, millions of deaths, are all Germany's fault. One second. The question, though, is, why would the Germans ever sign this? Why would they agree that it's all their fault, knowing that if it's all their fault, these things are going to be done to them? Why would they sign it? They didn't want to sign it. But remember how the war ended. On the 11th hour, the 11th month, the 11th day, the German army dropped their guns and walked home.